Please subscribe and hit the like button.
Well, good evening. Happy Shabbat. Welcome to Yada Yahweh Radio. I'm here with Kirk this evening. And Kirk, we do have another book that has been published. Jackie is continuing to do a wonderful job, the editing team as well. And we have Harvest now on the bookshelf. So 2/3 of the Mikre are completed, with the first one called Mikre Invitations. It covers Pesach, Matzah, and Makurim. It's, I think, about 650 pages, so it's a thorough presentation of Pesach, Matzah, and Makurim. And then the next one, Harvest. Harvest covers Shabbat and Towrah. And then right now I'm about 80%, maybe a little more, finished with the final chapters of what will be Moed appointments. And in fact, what I'm going to do here, and I'm sorry this is a little bit of a curveball here, Kirk, but I was translating something late this afternoon, or actually early this evening. Time flies when you're doing this. That was particularly interesting because one of the more adventurous, unique, uncommon references that I have made is that there are Mikre, for example, like Matzah, and another one like Yom Kippurim, where Yahweh specifically asks us to approach and come near the Isha or Ishe, depending on how you wish to vocalize it. And Isha and Ishe, if it's Ishe, it's the feminine of Ish. Ish is the Hebrew word for fire. When Yahweh appeared to Moshe, for example, on the top of Mount Horeb, he was manifest his nature as an Ish. And Isha is just the feminine nature, the feminine manifestation of God's fiery light, which would enlighten and would purify and would elevate. So, and if it's Isha, it's the feminine aspect of God's nature. And so that is the way that I rendered that instruction. Come into the feminine manifestation of Yahweh's light. And I've never had any way to validate that my conclusion was correct, other than I was very systematic. Each time that I would do it, I would explain all the options and walk people through all of the detail that led to that conclusion. So you were informed and had the opportunity to agree or disagree, but at least you understood how I came to that conclusion. Well, this afternoon, to my great surprise, Yahweh actually validated the association of Isha with the Spirit. So I want to walk you through a little bit of how I came to that, then we'll return to where we were last week.
Please, yes.
But this is fairly significant as it relates to how we are to observe Matzah and Kippurim. So I thought I'd go ahead and share this. Malachi exists to do two things. It's like Zechariah in the sense that it is a presentation of the fulfillment of Yom Kippur. So Yom Kippurim is presented in terms of what leads to it, what happens during it, what happens after it, how it's going to be fulfilled, who is doing what during the fulfillment of it. This day is so important to Yahweh that he goes to just great lengths to make us aware, so we're not surprised as to what's going to transpire on Kippurim, and recognizing that the whole purpose of Towrah, which is the chapter that we were on last week, is to encourage Yahweh's children, particularly Yisrael and Yehudim, to capitalize on this marvelous offer that is the Day of Reconciliations. So that one difference with Malachi is that Malachi is in addition to presenting the fulfillment of Yom Kippurim, it explains specifically what the chosen people have to be reconciled from. And the first and up to this point where I'm going to begin, which is the 8th statement of the 2nd chapter, all God has done thus far is excoriate rabbis. It is open season on rabbis, and everything that you could imagine that is anti-rabbi, God has said. He has called them out every which way. And really inside jabs, the kinds of things that if you were not a rabbi or a Haredim, an Orthodox Jew, you wouldn't even understand the dig. But if you understand Orthodox Judaism, what God says just goes right to your heart. So let me begin. As for you, you have turned from the way. Now, I'm speaking to rabbis and to those who are Orthodox Jews. You have caused many to stumble. Rabbis are the reason innumerable have faltered. And why did I put rabbis? Because you have caused many to stumble is kashal rabbim. Rabbis are the reason. Innumerable have faltered and fallen, leading to their downfall, making countless feeble and weak. By way of your Torah teachings.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
See, when a religious Jew says they are Torah observant, when they say Torah, 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 they're not speaking of the Torah that Yahowah conveyed in writing through Moshe. They're talking about their oral Torah. They call it the Torah of the mouth, which is really interesting because God actually says your problem is the Torah of the mouth. But the rabbinical claim, which is right up there with the claims of Scientology and Mormonism, is that in addition to the Torah that Yahweh revealed and placed in writing with Moshe, 1450 BCE, 3,450 years ago. At the same time, there was an oral Torah. And what's interesting about the oral Torah is that the written Torah says there's nothing more. And there is no reference of any kind to an oral Torah unless it is to discredit it. And, of course, the first evidence that we have of the oral Torah is circa 200 CE. 1,650 years thereafter. So, and even when it comes out, it's not in the voice of Moshe as Devarim or in the voice of Yahweh as are the first 4 books. No, it's in the voice of rabbis who didn't even exist at the time. But that is their claim, that there was a Torah of the mouth. So God says, you have caused many to stumble by way of your Torah instructions. You corrupt and invalidate the family covenant relationship of the Loi, singular, says Yahowah of the assembled and helpful envoys. Well, who is the Loi? If you're going to have the covenant relationship of the Loi, and it's Loi singular, who are we talking about?
Moshe.
Moshe is the Loi. Furthermore, I myself will give you over to being despised, bazah, to being discredited and seen as having no value, to be perceived as vile, contemptible, despicable, and worthless, seen as an object of scorn, even hated, and to being abased, humbled, and humiliated, to being diminished in stature, to being degraded and belittled as cultural outcasts. For the sake of all of the people, in so much as that which you have related by your mouth is unobservant of my ways. Therefore, you respect and honor, lifting up the presence of your Torah. Is there not one Father for all of us? Did not one God create us? So God is so. Why are we unfaithful and unreliable, even unscrupulous and untrustworthy toward our brethren, each violating and defiling the covenant relationship of our fathers? Yehudah has been unscrupulous and untrustworthy, and has engaged and acted in abhorrent and loathsome ways in Israel and in Jerusalem. Indeed, Yehudah is in violation of the agreement and has discredited and defiled that which is set apart unto Yahweh. This is because he, Yehudah, loves and is ruled by Lord Baal within the house of a foreign god. Yahweh will cut off the individual who engages in this, either as a witness providing testimony or one who responds, from camping out with Jacob when the offering is presented to approach and to be present with Yahweh. And this, another thing. You cover Yahweh's altar with tears and expressions of sorrow, bitterly shrieking and groaning because of your adversarial nature, your narrow-mindedness, and your troublesome experiences, such that there is no longer any attention paid to or regard for the presence of the gift which has been afforded, nor any desire to receive it with your hand. What God is saying is you're so into yourselves and your God-forsaken religion. You've gone so far down that rabbit hole, you can't even see that I've offered you the gift of reconciliation. You don't even know it's there. In fact, you're so miserable, you view it as a day of affliction, as a day of punishment, not a time of joy. But you ask, what is the problem? Upon the grounds that, this is God's answer, that Yahweh has repeatedly testified, providing a thoughtful connection between you and between such that you might understand the feminine manifestation of God's fiery light, which empowers, enlightens, and elevates Isha. When you were younger, with whom you have been unfaithful, betraying her. And yet she is your companion, providing fellowship. She is the one you should associate with as a friend and marriage partner, your covenant partner. Then the prophet asked, did he not engage as one? Did he not act and work as one? And as a soul in corporeal fashion, himself is related kin through the approach of his spirit? And why was the one inquiring about and seeking godly offspring? Why did he want to sow the seeds that would lead to children? Therefore, you should be observant, closely examining and carefully considering everything with the Spirit and through the Spirit, and with the feminine manifestation of God's fiery light, which empowers and enlightens, even elevates. None of you should betray. So God is saying that he is one, and yet he presented himself corporeally with the soul and as spirit, and that he was as one, did all of these things seeking offspring. And therefore, we should be especially observant, considering every aspect of this through the Spirit and with the Spirit, because the feminine manifestation of God's fiery light is someone we should not betray. So that's a very complex concept. But it strikes me as validation that there is a direct association between the Isha and the set-apart spirit of Yahowah, and that God as one fulfilled his Pesach promise through the corporeal manifestation as it was handled, it was enabled through the Spirit. So anyway, that's what I was working on. I've written most of the commentary on that, and I'll save that for another time. But oh my, those are that's what's leading to the fulfillment of Kippurim, and God was kind enough to explain what it means to come into the presence of the Isha on Yom Kippurim by that very statement.
Do you get blown away sometime by how quick everything is lining up? It seems to me, because I'm looking from the outside. Well, I do have a little bit of an inside view, but is these things are just like coming in rapid fire, and especially in the last 2 years? I'm just the questions you ask.
We are, I think, right now in the last of the Towrah chapters as we jump to. And so that means there's 4 or 5 Kippurim chapters that are filled with insights that we would not have been able to fathom even a year ago. And so, yes, the connections are coming very quickly. The denunciations of Rabbinic Judaism through the Yom Kippurim chapters, everything that Yahweh has to say about Yom Kippurim is reconciliation is necessary because of Judaism. That Judaism is what has caused you to be Jews as opposed to Yehudim, and that so long as you are religiously Jewish as opposed to ethnically Jewish, then there is no hope of reconciliation, and that to be ethnically Jewish, there is that hope should you disavow the rabbis. And I did not know enough, I guess, about them and their claims to be able to identify with all of this previously. Being married to a Jewish woman has certainly, who is Torah observant, by the way, and not her Torah, but
the written
actually,
one.
in fact, Jewish women are not allowed to read the Talmud. And a rabbi wakes up. A Orthodox Jew wakes up every morning. His first prayer of the day is, "Thank God I'm not a woman." These guys are just creeps. Although they do look awfully effeminate to me, so maybe their prayer is mistaken. But God, I did not think that I would ever be in the position where I was this outspoken against Judaism, but nonetheless, that's where it has taken us. And yes, the insights that have been derived from studying his testimony over the last even 3 or 4 months have been profound at an exponential level beyond what we had previously experienced. And, I look over now on the bookshelf, and you go to YadaYah.com, and you can look at the bookshelf. I think there's 19 books, and we'll soon have the 20th. I would think within 2 weeks we'll have the 20th. So we have come a long way. It's been a major undertaking by the edit team and our fact checkers and our copy editors and our webmaster and internet team and of course Jackie for coordinating it all, and I'm in this chair 10 hours a day, so we are really devoted to getting this out. And even the gentleman that is a senior with Amazon in terms of overseeing the publishing of the books, he had a conversation with Jackie today, and he says, I read and look at hundreds and hundreds of books every day. And he says, it's very seldom that I would tell somebody that from covers to the inside presentation, that your books are really among the very best. They are beautifully done, exceedingly professional. I just want you to know that looking at your books, they're as good as any that we have at Amazon. So that was really quite a compliment to and again, the whole team, because this was a group effort to create this new look and readability inside. So I'd encourage everybody, go to Yada Yah at just go to the yadayah.com site, and it's a direct link to Amazon for the books you can buy. Kindle books, there's an electronic version that you can have on a tablet that you can also get on our site. You can read all of our books free on your tablet or computer or phone, and of course you can go to the Amazon site. And they're surprisingly inexpensive for the quality of the book and the size of the book. So the next one out is going to be Moed. One of the things I did this week is I laid out all of the rest of the books. I took everything that I had ever written, and I converted it to the new format, paginated it, put it into a volume, determined what was unsalvageable because it was just too New Testament oriented, and so occasionally I will quote a little from the Olivet Discourse, a little from the Sermon on the Mount, and a little from Revelation if there's a direct affirmation of it from another prophet. And so I went through everything that was redeemable and put them all into volumes. We went all the way through, so now we have all the way through volume 12 of Yada Yah, reworked what will be the volumes of An Introduction to God, put everything we had to say about the Torah into 2 volumes of Yada Yah, taking it out of An Introduction to God. I think it fits better in Yada Yah. It's going to come after, those volumes will come after the Moed volume that I'm working on right now. And it ends with Babel, which is the last days, and the history of the transition of the various beasts from Babylon all the way to the Roman Catholic Church. So that's where we are. We've got it all laid out at the pace that we're on. It's probably still another year and a half worth of work before we get to the end of all of the rewrites and retranslations. But, thank Leah. She was the one that came to me and said I wouldn't give your books now to a Jewish friend. And she said it, I says, when I first encountered them, I didn't eat, I didn't shower, I didn't sleep. I read them for days on days on days on end, and they transformed my life. But based upon what we know now, if you go back and read your earliest book, you're not going to like what you read. And, she was right. It was a fair criticism. Yeah, and it mainly we didn't try to deceive anybody. It's just that I had already rid them of Paul, so I did that in the first 7 edits through the material. Yes. But we've come to understand Yahweh's devotion to the Messiah, who is Dode, his son, who is Dode, who is the one who is returning, and so we had to reflect Dode's role. And the prophecies pertaining to Dode throughout those earlier books. And then there's just been a lot of other insights that we have gleaned along the way and come to a real appreciation, a honed understanding of what the Mikra represent of the covenant and the Torah itself and God's relationship to his people. So it has been a labor of love, and that particular thing I just shared with you without the commentary is something that I'll try to complete that thought and the analysis of the whole thing tomorrow and over the next couple of days, hopefully get that chapter done. And then I'm on to Sukkah. And once I finish the Sukkah chapter, we'll have another volume ready to print. So let's return now to 2 statements before, so we pick it up in context where we were a week ago. God speaking of the fulfillment of Towrah through my favorite prophet, who is Yahshua. I think I'm Yah's favorite student. We seem to have a really good relationship. Yah wrote, "Then those who are right, Sadak, those who are vindicated, righteous, and just, who are correct and in accord with the standard and thus upright, will vanish. Their whereabouts unknown. Abad, they're going to disappear, such that those who remain will not know where they have gone. And no one will give it any thought. Not one individual will take it to heart, will examine what may have occurred, with no one pondering the portent." Now, that, by the way, says two different things, both of which are relevant. The first thing it says is that it's really true that neither Jews nor Christians have any understanding of what these prophecies foretell. They just don't know. They don't get it. They don't. Jews are so tied up in the minutia of their Talmud, and Christians with their New Testament, that even when they go to what they would call an Old Testament, all they can do is to try to make everything about their Christ, to try to give him some legitimacy about themselves. And so no one understands what God is talking about here, that the people who are vanishing are the ones who are right. To be right, you have to be consistent and correct with his Torah teaching. And so that excludes all religious Jews and all Christians, as well as all socialist secular humanists. So no one's going to understand that. And second, there's going to be so much carnage and so much destruction and so much despair and so much fake news, conspiracies, that it's just going to get lost amongst all of that. You know, you could have a tragedy in the middle of when COVID was the lead story, and about ready to be the lead story again with the Delta variant. Yes. And what you had was the death ticker. I mean, every newspaper, every news program began with, well, another 175,000 people convicted COVID today, and 2,753 died. The total death count in the world and in America it was the death ticker. And so things are going to be so bad that thousands of people are going to vanish, and no one's going to notice or care. Loyal and devoted individuals will be harvested, gathered together, and taken away. Well, no one makes the connection to comprehend what has occurred. This is just so amazingly clear and well written. For indeed, from the presence of this disastrous calamity and miserable suffering, such wickedness and wrongdoing, those who are correct will be taken away. How about that for a clear explanation of the Towrah harvest?
Works for me.
Yes, and so God isn't saying here, I'm going to take them away when everything is peachy keen. No, they're going to be taken out of a disastrous calamity, a horrible time when things are so bad that people aren't going to even notice the disappearance of a few thousand people. So, friends, what that tells me, it's not much of a chance this is going to happen in the fall of 2026. Possible, but I don't think it's going to happen in 2027. If, based upon this, and, I'm extrapolating. We do not know the year. We can deduce the year to the fall of 2020 Towrah on 2026, 27, 28, or 29. One of those 4 days. So I can narrow it down to 4 days. I can't tell you which one of those 4 days. And quite frankly, I'm not sure I want to know. All I can tell you is I'm hoping it's the last one. We've got plenty of time in eternity. What we don't have is plenty of time here to convey God's message to his people. So the later we go, by far the better it is. And that means it's a shorter period of time, by the way. If it is in September of 2029, it's only 6 months before Elia and his partner, show up on Passover the following year. So that part is also, so that's also reassuring. By the way, there's a really interesting thing that when they show up, you know what hovers above them the whole time?
Well, I know now. It's the Torah.
Flying scroll of the Torah. Yeah, it's pretty neat. Yeah.
Okay. Does that mean there's no bodies to be found? The bodies just
I don't know. What is another body amongst all the carnage that the world is going to foresee? Do I know? I think it would actually be
disintegrated.
No, I don't know. I don't know what God's going to do with the body. I don't really care what God does with the body.
I don't know. I got you.
And I can tell you that our departure isn't going to mean anything to anybody. That's what it says right here. So I don't have to worry about it. All we have to worry about is we can Towrah our hearts out between now and then.
Yes.
Right? So that would be a good thing. Yeshaya 57:2. And then he will arrive. And then he will arrive. So there's not a lot of time between and then they're gone and then he will arrive. Then he will arrive, entering into and including among the reconciled, the tranquil, the prosperous, the safe and saved. They will be spiritually allied with his restful environs, walking in a manner which is right, honest, fitting, and proper with her. So, very soon thereafter, and then he will arrive, entering into and included among the reconciled, the tranquil, prosperous, safe, and saved. They will be spiritually allied within his restful environs, walking in a manner which is right, honest, fitting, profit, and proper with her. We can try to ascertain who he is, but personally, I don't think this is speaking of the arrival of Dode, although it could be. I think it's more likely, although it's very possible that he's speaking of Dode, could also be speaking of the arrival of Elia, prior to Dode's arrival. But as for you all, this is where we were at the conclusion of our program last week. But as for you all who are present, here and now, you are the children of fortune tellers who are blowing smoke. You're the seed of adultery and prostitution. So, as for all of you who are present, this is Karab, who are offering your legal retort here and now, henna, at this time and place. You are the children of fortune tellers and are blowing smoke. This is Beni Anan, sons of those casting obscure spells, pretending to foretell the future. Clouded judgments, conjuring up a respect for the dead, while convorting with evil spirits and making things appear to be other than what they actually are. The seed, the offspring of Naaf, of those who are unfaithful by being religious, and prostitution, whereby you accept money for being unfaithful, luring others away from loving relationships. It is, I think, interesting, Kirk, to recognize that this is very rabbinic. The rabbis actually worship, and there's really no other word for it. They worship dead rabbis. When there was I don't know if it was 50 or 100 or whatever it was. I think it was 50. Jews, Orthodox Jews, that were killed because the scaffolding fell when they stampeded one another during a festival they were attending. Well, they were going to the gravesite of the rabbi who is credited with the Zohar. And there was going to be like 150,000 ultra-Orthodox Jews going there to celebrate the death of this rabbi circa 200 CE. They make pilgrimage to the Ukraine to celebrate rabbis. They celebrate the death of the Lord of the Good Name, Baal Shem Tov. They revere the dead.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's overwhelming. They study and speak of rabbis as if the words of the rabbis were scripture. And if you're the inspiration for scripture, you're being worshipped as if you were a god. And that's what's happened in Rabbinic Judaism. They have replaced Yahowah with dead gods in the form of men. You know, they've joined the other religions. The Jesus Christ of Christendom is modeled after Paul.
Totally worshipped. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, modeled after Paul. And the Allah of Islam is Muhammad's alter ego.
Mm-hmm.
So they've joined the other gods, the other religions.
As I read this, Yada, it's so all the translations will say sorcery and adultery, prostitution, and so forth. And it's in the if you look up each one of the words individually, they'll come up with the same thing. And it's all idolatrous worship, and it's stated so in the thing, but no one will broach it that way. And I don't understand how it could be missed so much. I know that scholars refuse to lose their status and are terribly afraid of that, and they can't function and they can't lose their jobs and such, so they just go along with it. But this is so obvious, even in a poor English translation. It's very obvious what Yahweh was complaining about.
How many wives did Moshe have? How many wives did Moshe have? One or two?
Well, let's see. He had two at least.
Yeah, two.
I don't know what he had. If he had anything in Egypt, we don't know about it.
Yeah. How about? Yeah, it's true. How about Yahweh's favorite person of all time, Dode?
Oh, he had quite a few.
8.
Maybe a dozen.
Yeah, 8.
Okay.
8 wives.
Fair enough. That's eternal. That's enough.
And then so more than one by the Christian and religious definition would be adultery. He had 8, and on top of that, he had 10 concubines.
Yes.
So if God were saying that adultery in the sense of the way the word is viewed in English, which would be a non-monogamous marriage, is a concern to him, then the person that he said was right and is the example we should follow would be wrong, wouldn't it?
After. Yes, that's right.
Yes, yeah. So God's issue is not
a metaphor,
right? Yeah. Is not adultery. It's a metaphor that we understand is that being unfaithful. And listen, Dode could have 8 wives and still commit adultery by not taking care of, not supporting, not being truthful with any one of his wives. And so it's still possible that a person with 8 wives could commit an adulterous act, but the adultery is not the way that we view it. I think to a large degree, Yahweh made man a non-monogamous being. If you read the story of most of the people in his Torah and prophets, monogamy isn't stressed, and I think it's to a large degree it's not the nature of men. That doesn't mean that you don't treat your wife or girlfriend or whoever you're with the utmost respect. And today, it's a real good idea to have a monogamous relationship because there's a lot of get-you-goomies out there that you want to be really careful of. But truth is an important thing. And what God is using adultery here as na'af as being unfaithful from a religious point of view, chasing after false gods. And he uses the term prostitution not in the sense of being a pimp and having a slew of whores. No, it's to accept money while being unfaithful,
yes,
luring others from what should be a loving relationship to have a meaningless relationship. Prostitution is being paid to be a religious cleric.
Yeah, every scholar does that. That's why they won't give up their money and tell the truth. I mean, you're the only one that didn't do it for a money motive. Therefore, you're not bound to, you started out with, I'm going to go where the words lead.
Yeah. Now, I would not have
reading
known
a whole lot this week. Yeah.
Until I searched it. But one of the things I searched was, how do rabbis make money? And you know the number one way that rabbis make money is by selling blessings.
I assume it's feet.
Selling blessings.
That's
the richest rabbi
the product
in
is
history
not much of a product, is it?
Is worth hundreds of millions of dollars, was anyway, for selling blessings. You paid him money and he would give you a blessing, your life would be better. So he is a fortune teller that you pay money to. So a prostitute fortune teller. One of the people that paid him repeatedly to give him a better future didn't get the better future when it killed him, so he's not with us anymore. And I guess he wasn't very good at predicting his own future. But nonetheless, there you go. So they sell their blessings. So this is, by promoting their Talmud, their Mishnah, their Zohar over the Torah, they are anon, blowing smoke, clouding the issue.
Yeah.
In the Babylonian Talmud, there are copious reports of rabbis anon, casting spells. But their anon judgment is obscured, especially when they anon conjure up respect for the dead, all but worshiping the rabbis who have deceived before them.
So,
from Yahweh's perspective, rabbis are anon. They're consorting with their evil spirits. They're anon, pretending to be what they are not. Powerful term.
Yeah.
So what was it you had a point you wanted to make, or did I distract you to the point you forgot?
I think that's it. I just it doesn't put up red flag to people that have a little bit of a brain. These people are very smart as a group, and it doesn't. This sorcery and stuff never comes up. They never think about that.
No, see,
I mean, you're just so afraid.
The problem with Rabbinic Judaism is, particularly in its most popular form, which is the Haredim, the Hasidic, the ultra-Orthodox, is that the religion demands that they stay off the internet. So they can't listen to what we have to say. They can't read what we have come to know. They are not ever reading the actual Torah and prophets. They spend their entire time reading the Babylonian Talmud. And the nature of the religion, it's a full-time job. That the Talmud tells you what to say in the morning, which, thank God, wasn't born a woman. It tells you what side of the bed to get up on, how to wipe your bottom, what to do if you were to see a mouse, how you sit down for a meal, what you can eat, what you can't eat, how you're supposed to turn on a light. It is everything. It is a total hole that sucks in every aspect of your life. And so they never get out of that. And if you never get out of it, if you don't look for, and you won't even consider anything that explains, this is really stupid. And by the way, the God you claim that you are serving by this absurd religion hates you. Hates you. He will go on to say, you are so disgusting to me that I'm going to cover you with the entrails and the dung of the very animals that you're sacrificing. How revolting you are to me. They are anon. God despises Rabbinic Judaism. And of course, the whole concept in Israel of Rabbinic Judaism is that the rabbis have demanded that they have the sole power to determine who is and is not Jewish. And DNA isn't in their vocabulary. They don't give a hoot what your DNA says if you are Jewish or not Jewish. They only care are you Orthodox or not. If you're a Reformed Jew, no, you're not Jewish. Unless you're ultra-Orthodox, you do not qualify in Israel as a Jew. So it is the rabbis who have denied Jews the real meaning of their name, Yehudim, beloved of Yah.
Mm-hmm.
By defining Jews, they have eliminated the original term, Yehudim. The product of spiritual adultery, the rabbis have become prostitutes. And make no mistake, Yahweh is describing today's rabbis. There is no one else present at this time and place who would otherwise qualify for this scathing indictment. Moreover, as we've seen, it is a perfect fit. Size infinitesimal small and available only in black. The rabbis are exalted ones, see themselves as being in control. They present their words as law. They will actually claim that their Torah is the oral law. And of course, it is rabbinic law. 600 years before the term rabbi was first applied by men, by religious zealots, Yahweh asks, over whom and upon what basis are you effeminate and overly sensitized individuals exploiting and mocking? Manifesting feminine, manifesting feminine attributes, more like women than men, verbally ridicule and exploiting the sensitivities of others, while finding pleasure in being pampered by the resulting luxury. Against whom and over what do you open your mouth and boast, sticking out your tongues? Are you not the children of rebellion who rose up in clear defiance of authority, the seed of vain and useless liars and mistaken beliefs? Youch.
Yeah,
rabbis, beware. I mean, God has your number, and you're not going to like his call. He has exposed the rabbis and laid them bare.
Yeah, that Shikar is tough.
Yeah. Over whom and on what basis are you
lies.
effeminate and overly sensitized individuals exploiting and mocking?
Yeah.
Against what and over whom do you open your mouths and boast, sticking out your tongues? Are you not the children of rebellion who rose up in defiance of authority, the seed of vain and useless liars and mistaken beliefs? You would think that since Yashayah is the great Isaiah scroll, they've got a whole shrine to just this one scroll, that as the greatest of the prophets, and I'm going to by the greatest of the prophets, Yahweh said there is a way that Moshe was the greatest, and that he liberated the children of Israel from the oppressive nature of Mitzrayim and took them to the promised land, and was the prophet through whom he revealed his Torah. Okay, so I mean that's pretty tough to beat. That's a nice resume. You know, if you like that kind of stuff, that's a really impressive resume. I mean, actually, I really like. I'm not being silly here because I love Moshe. The more you read about Moshe, the more you come to admire the guy's intellect, his backbone, his courage, his character, his wit. It was a remarkable guy. But it's just when it comes just to pure prophecy. Let's leave all that other stuff. Standing up for your people against the most powerful country on earth as an 80-year-old, and saving maybe 600,000 of your brethren and taking them to safety, and then revealing to the world the most important book ever written. Okay, I get it. That's really impressive. But just as a pure prophet, and just as a prophet, Yahowah is my guy. And you look at all of the great prophecies, and the fact that we have, the entire Yahowah scroll intact among the Dead Sea Scrolls. Why is it?
Because it needs to be said for here this time.
Why is it these guys can't read it?
I
think Yahweh explains it through Yahowah, and he says, I'm so tired of what you've done, I'm just going to blind you to the whole thing. But here it is.
I was thinking about.
Go ahead.
No, I was thinking about that today. I was doing a little study on the words and how they've changed them. I was thinking in terms of the rabbis have changed everything from the letters in particular that are so simple to read. I mean, there's a nog with a gimel at the end pointing the other direction. If they hadn't changed the original lettering, they could never pull this off. They not only changed the words, they changed the letters, they changed everything about it, and then they accent it so you can't pronounce it, so you can't pronounce his name. This is just total mutiny.
Yeah.
I mean, this is awful.
A nog has the person walking away from their children.
Yeah.
Right?
Walking in the wrong direction. I mean, it's
right.
a second.
Walking in the wrong direction, which would be away, because the nun is the second letter. They're walking from the children.
Yeah.
Which is what God's complaint is. You're killing your own children.
Yeah.
The children of rebellion, or the children that walking away. Nog is very clear what it.
So I mean, you can't miss it. It's nothing about your translation that is incorrect that I can find. In fact, is just right on the money, and anybody could dig it up if they look.
It's one thing too that. Over these last 3 months, particularly as I began to do Towrah and Kippurim, it has been a wholesale onslaught against rabbis. And rabbis are vicious. They play very, very dirty, and they're a conniving lot. And so the natural inclination would be to say, I think I'm going to avoid that battle. But God doesn't do that. That's not what those who work with and serve Yahweh do. They're not gimmels. They do not walk away. They confront.
Yes.
And so, it's why the word goyim, has the foot's going in the wrong direction.
Always walking away.
Always walking away. And so this is a word that says walk away. When God wants you to stand up, have a backbone, show some character. That was the thing. More than anything else, I think it was the thing that Yahweh liked most about Moshe, is that he was living the best life that a person could possibly live. He saw one of his people being abused, and he had the courage to go confront it and stop it. That is the most important aspect of a person's character, and that's the kind of person God wanted to work with. But not these fellows. They are effeminate. They go in the wrong direction. They all they do is flap their lips and their tongues. They are the seed of useless liars and mistaken beliefs. Just looking at the Hasidic gives me the creeps. And evidently I'm in good company. They are so effeminate with their morning clothes and their curly cues, with their arms the size of straws, because they don't work. It's apparent that they have never earned an honest day's living in their lives. Mind you, God loves women, and so do I, but these little boys act more like little girls. I suspect that Dode will find the rabbis particularly useless. As Israel's most stalwart supporter, he will reject them out of hand for their universal failure to lift a finger in the defense of their country. Rabbis claim their authority from the Torah, and yet they are not mentioned in it, other than to be condemned by the prophets. They claim to represent G-D, and yet they despise his name. and rebel against his authority. Without reason to boast, they are obnoxious. Yahweh has provided a fitting depiction of today's rabbis, calling them Yaled, the little boys who pesha, rebelled, rising up in open defiance of his authority. Their religious revolt remains contrary to the established standard of the Torah. These rabbis are sheker, vain and useless liars, fraudulently promoting mistaken beliefs. Their testimony is irrational, it's deceptive, and it's absolutely disappointing. And yet 20% of Jews worldwide guzzle it down as if their diatribes served as a dog returning to its vomit. If you are among them and listening to this, just go away. I doubt you are, because you have no access to the internet. You're scolded if you were to learn anything. You are as disgusting as your religion. God wants nothing to do with you, which makes your lies all the more appalling. Now, rabbis will protest that their title means teacher, and yet that's not true. To instruct and teach in Hebrew, is lakak. To be a teacher is more. The root of the title rabbi is rab, exalted and great.
To grow great.
Rabbi is from rabbi, which means I am great. The verbal root of rabbah meaning to become great. Applying this sentiment to oneself conveys arrogance. Listen, God wants us to be great. God's going to empower and enrich us, adopt us as his children. He wants to celebrate, magnifying us in every possible way. But it's okay to celebrate what God is doing for us. It's not okay to brag and say, apart from God, I am great. Because apart from God, you're the sum total of the elements that which you're comprised. And at a store, that's probably about $1.59. The hubris of religion is obviously its essence. Are you among those who burn with lust and rage over the Lamb and leadership, and under every spreading tree, killing the children within the depressions beneath the clefts of the rock? Yahweh asks. Well, that's an interesting reference. Burning with lust and rage. Well, do you know that rabbis, per capita, are as prone to sexual abuse as our priests?
I did not know that until recently.
Yeah. The two differences are that rabbis have this protective assembly around them. They are so beloved, so esteemed, so protected by their constituents that when it is found out that a rabbi is diddling another man's wife, the other man's wife is the one who is ostracized and the rabbi is exonerated. And the rabbis who have had all sorts of inappropriate sexual affairs are very, very seldom prosecuted. And so as bad as the Roman Catholic Church has been on priestly pedophilia, at least now we have, because of the prevalence of it and the number of priests, we have independent jurisdictions exposing them and indicting them. But in Israel, the government would be afraid to take a rabbi on.
Well, especially if you tied them all up in the government parliament to begin with.
That's correct. That's correct.
What are you going to do?
That's right. So what are you going to do? So But they are sexual perverts. There's a huge percentage of them. They have no morals. They are sexual perverts. So that part of it is interesting. And of course, they have animosity over the lamb. They have so much animosity over the lamb, it's the one thing that doesn't show up on the Passover plate. They throw one meatless bone on the plate, and otherwise they've got dinner that Cain would have delighted in.
That's a great insight, by the way. I read that and I said, wow.
Yeah, that's really it. They've gone right back to Cain's meal. Cain's offering, not Abel's.
No meat.
And no meat. And they are killing their children, and then under every spreading tree. So I was wondering, what are they talking about under the spreading tree? Well, what's interesting here is that there are a whole series of rabbinical passions over trees. One lies in Tu B'Shabbat, the 15th day of Shabbat, which is celebrated as Rosh Hashanah Lanat, the New Year of the trees. It's one of 4 New Years in the rabbinical calendar, and it's presented in the Mishnah for the purpose of establishing an annual cycle of tithes, opportunity to enrich them, of course, which they receive as a religious mandate. It is similarly promoted in the Talmud and in Kabbalistic and Hasidic literature. It is morphed into the Israeli Arbor Day. Now, this was something that Mike, our fact checker, came up with, but I just thought it was brilliant. He said this insight is that even in their malfeasance, there are insights into the rotting hearts of rabbis. 15 would typically be written Yod-He, 10 plus 5 equals 15. But since this spells Yah, because you've got 10 is the Yod and 5 is the He in the numbering system of Hebrew, that spells Yah. That was the name of their nemesis, the name that should never be spoken. The rabbis went with 9 plus 6, Tetwah. That's just amazing. Mm-hmm. Further, the rabbis chose to impose their assembly in Shabbat, which means scepter, thereby staking their dominion over Yah. Gotcha, boys. Yep, you can't go up against our fact checker and prevail. Rabbinical malfeasance has been Ra'anan spread far and wide, not only with the Jews in diaspora, but with the Jewish contributions to Christianity, to Islam, and to socialist secular humanism. These deep and dark depressions of religious thought have killed more children than all of man's other institutions and civilizations combined. And every child forced into Hasidic Judaism by his father is destined to die. In this regard, Ra'anan is based on Ra, which is to disseminate evil. The 2 nuns indicate that the recipients of this evil, the victims, are children. Likewise, Nachal also denotes disease and infliction of a mortal and incurable wound. Further, the same 3 letters speak of taking a possession, especially an inheritance right. The associations with stealing a child's inheritance and of spreading disease are especially appropriate when viewed from a religious context. Further, the root of she'ef, translated kleps, is likely se'ef. It means disloyalty, twisted thinking, despicable and contemptible behavior, moral corruption, and Torahlessness. Rendered in this manner, the rabbis were killing their own children, taking their inheritance, which was to be with God, by way of their own disloyal, twisted, and despicable behavior. So even in a line that you'd just read it and say, okay, he's waxing poetic, he's talking about trees and clefts and the like. When you actually study the words, there's a pretty good explanation as to how the religious leadership of Israel is killing their own children. Any of the words there that you analyzed you wanted to talk about, Kirk? And
well, no, I do it, so many times just to find out if there's anything else, any more crumbs on the table, so to speak. But no, all of these are good, and all the letters verify it. For the most part, each time I do the letters, I find that there's another layer added to the thing. You analyze the letter, each one of the letters. So nothing that's needs to break in this time, but it's still pretty cool stuff. I mean, it's exactly right. I'm not patting you on the back just to pat you on the back. I've done this for years and years. It's just, boy, this is, and everybody should be doing this if you have any qualms about this. Because this is not only I do it if we never talk about it, I do the same thing, and I have miles of material, but it helps me.
Yeah, it's why the new translations I think are better. Is that you're just taking more time and we're able to make better connections so that you understand the words. For example, this last statement that we just read, if rather than saying just the simplistic term for each word, we looked at the basis of each word, its actionable root. This is what God just said of the rabbis. He said, you spread out and grow rich by taking the lives of children, spreading disease and stealing their inheritance under the auspices of highly twisted thinking and despicable behavior. That's what the words mean. Now, continuing to use symbolic language as a play on words and to dress down the religious dress-ups, this is what we find next. This is Yeshaya 57:6. Your fate, grave and inheritance, are among the smooth-talking and insulting flatterers and thieves who destroy. There they go as your lot, and so to them you have poured out drink offerings, uplifting grain offerings. For these things shall I relent and change my mind. So your fate, your share and reward, your apportionment, reflecting your choice, is the grave. Your inheritance is among the smooth-talking and flattering thieves. There they go as your lot. And so to them you have poured out drink offerings, uplifting grain offerings. The rabbis have their own version of everything. There's a special fruit that only they have the rights to sell. It's prohibitively expensive. And a special bouquet of flowers and a special tied-up version of some grain. Everything is an opportunity for them to make a nickel by overcharging people. One of the really funny things is that we talked a little about kosher on our last program. For those that are following the news, if you've got Ben and Jerry's in your refrigerator, please throw it out.
I read that. Yes.
If it's in your local store, please chastise them for carrying it. Please never buy it again. Ben and Jerry's their board of directors has announced that it isn't consistent with their corporate ethics to have stores and the occupied territory. Mind you, almost 100% of the employees and those stores are Fakistinians, and the owners are mostly Yehudim, and they're selling a product that is ice cream, for crying out loud.
A little chillin' mostly.
And to stores that have names for things both in Arabic and in Hebrew, and do not discriminate who comes to the store, and most of those stores employ more Fakistinians than Yehudim. But nonetheless, they say it's not consistent with their values. They've joined the BDS crowd.
So I'll let the facts get in the way, huh?
Don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. So So the rabbis are paid money to call Ben and Jerry's kosher. So the rabbis now will take a kosher rating away from a restaurant that follows all their goddamn rules and that does everything according to the book. But if they operate that restaurant on the Shabbat, they'll lose their kosher status. So now here is a company who has come out and said, we think the land belongs to the Fakistinians. We want them to take it, even though they're terrorizing you, and they want every Jew dead. We still want to appease them, and we're on their side. And these rabbis, because they're paid money to render Ben and Jerry's kosher, say, oh, no, we're not going to take away their kosher status. We don't give a crap that they're leading a crusade to destroy Israel. We don't care. They can retain their kosher status because they have to pay us for it. These are just utter scum.
Yeah, no joke.
So Yahowah has their number, and he is not relenting regarding them, and nor should he. And this gets so bad with God, actually so good, with God condemning Rabbinic Judaism and rabbis, that at one point I said, if you're reading this and you're just tired of me trashing rabbis, that's not who your argument should be with. I'm just telling you what God says. If you don't like God trashing Rabbinic Judaism, if you think it's anti-Semitic to trash Judaism, take it up with God.
Yeah. Well, you can't be. You can't be anti-Semitic when they won't even pronounce his name.
Yeah, yes, well, yeah, because anti-Semitic would be against the name, and they themselves are the most against the name. So Rabbinic Judaism is the ultimate anti-Semitic organization, because no organization is more against the name. Now, God's fair. We all get to choose our fate. We can accept his inheritance or cast our lot among men and see where their flattering talk leads. But be certain of this. Yahweh is not going to change his mind. He is not going to change his approach. You cannot appease him. Heaven comes on his term, while hell awaits those who advocate a different approach. You can have hell on your terms, not heaven. Yahweh is saying that he isn't going to change his nature. He's not going to change his covenant to accommodate those who have worked against him, to the detriment of his children. The third statement, Yahweh etched in stone, stands as he wrote it. Lifting up and supporting deceitfulness and lifelessness in God's name continues to be unforgivable. Speaking to the Jewish religious leadership, God says, on a high mountain you have arrogantly made your bed, raising it up and advocating it. Additionally, there you ascribed high status to yourselves by slaughtering the living Sabbath, sacrificing life as an act of worship. Rabbis have indeed made their own bed, and in it they will sleep. No matter how lofty a perch they have set it upon, every edifice they have contrived will come crashing down. If it were not for the lives they have sacrificed in the name of their religion, no one would care about what they have done to themselves. Throughout all of human history, around the globe, clerics and kings have used child sacrifice to drive fear into the hearts of their subjects and thus control them. But the brutal murder of children remains the most heinous crime political and religious leaders have ever perpetrated. And yet, more abhorrent still, at least in the eyes of God, is spiritual assassination of children at the hands of their parents and the religious. This occurs in churches. Yep. Occurs in churches, occurs in synagogues, temples, and mosques. It is our responsibility to educate our children, to expose them to evidence which exists in favor of Yahowah and against all of the other claims to divinity. That way, when they are exposed to false witnesses, they will be forearmed and equipped to deal with the wide variety of threats launched against their souls. Fearful of the truth, the Hasidic deny their children access to the internet. Well, now we know why. In this passage, God has also warned us that religions have a bad habit of extending their power and influence by motivating their adherents to plunder and kill all of those who do not capitulate. All too often, the religious warrior is promised admission to paradise along with a dubious list of heavenly rewards for killing others. Now, while Islam is renowned for this, they don't have a patent on it. Shinto, Imperial Japan had kamikazes, the divine wind. Spartans valued no life and lived to die in battle. The Vikings had stations in Valhalla equivalent in reward to how ferociously one died. Pope Urban II offered the Crusaders a pardon from judgment if they died fighting to regain the Holy Land. Returning to the gatekeeper metaphor, Yahowah, speaking through his prophet, predicts that the religious rulers would stake out their claim on the wrong side of the door. This then is Yeshayah 57:8. Then lingering at another door and its framework, you have set up and placed your own memorial and maxims. Indeed, separated from me, you have revealed and uncovered your bed. You've climbed into it while enlarging it. Then you establish for yourselves and with them devotees and lovers, in whose bed you have beheld and gazed upon their phallus. God's being pretty graphic here. He does not like religion. So he says, lingering at another door, that door is Passover. You linger at Passover's door. And at the framework of this door, the doorway to life, you have set up and placed your own memorial and maxims. They've got a rule for everything that sits on the plate. They've got a prayer for everything you're supposed to say. They've got a ritual for everything you're supposed to do. They've got it all except what Passover actually represents. And the single worst part of it all is that the religious rabbis do the same goddamn thing that Christians do. Christians are fixated on what happened on Passover, although they don't ever associate with Passover, and they ignore matzah as if it didn't exist. It's an express ticket to hell, because if you were to actually celebrate Passover and skip matzah, you're eternal and yet corrupted. What do the rabbis do? They've turned matzah into an ingredient. If you read a rabbinic site or go to a rabbinic calendar, there is no mikra of matzah. Matzah is simply an ingredient that is part of Passover. The most important mikra is rendered an ingredient by rabbinic Judaism. Talk about establishing your own memorial maxims. The truth is that Passover is part of Chag Matzah, as is Bakurim. The celebration is matzah. Passover is just part of it. But to celebrate Passover and ignore the lamb and ignore that it's the doorway to life and only mention matzah as if it were an ingredient and not the most important event to celebrate is to deny all of the benefits for all of the people who listen to you. This is setting up at the framework your own memorial and maxims, your own symbols and signs, proverbs and statements. And when you do that, you're separated from God. It's eternal separation. To celebrate Passover and ignore matzah is to be eternally separated from God. So you've climbed into your bed all right. You've enlarged it with lots of other religious Jews. Your devotees and lovers with you in your bed, and they do love their rabbis.
Mm-hmm.
Choosing to gaze upon their phallus. They treat circumcision, too, as a ritual, one, of course, that they profit from. And they've got a whole ritual associated with it. What did God say about the ritual of circumcision?
I don't recall it being a ritual. It's just mothers do that to the children.
He says parents on the 8th day circumcise your sons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did he say you need to do it with a rabbi present? Did he say you need to say this prayer when you do it? Did he say you needed to use this instrument? Did he say that instrument needed to be blessed? Did he say you need to pay for it? Did he tell you how much you have to cut off? Who had to cut it off? Is there anything about it? Did he call it a brisk? Is there anything about circumcision that Yahweh says other than on the 8th day, parents, circumcise your sons and do so as a sign so that you can remember?
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Because it is a sign of the covenant. That's it. So what do rabbis do? They focus on everything but. They get fixated on the object just as they get fixated on the ingredient of matzah and miss the entire purpose. They get fixated on their little job, doing the little job, and miss the entire purpose. One of the things you just never hear a rabbi talking about is the covenant. And another thing you never hear them talking about is the set-apart spirit. You never hear them talk about the set-apart spirit, never hear them talking about the covenant. Never hear them talk about matzah. And they've turned Yom Kippurim into punishment.
For the New Year. Yeah, I know. Yeah,
oh, boy, what could be worse than God reconciling his relationship with us? If God reconciles his relationship with us, we're out of business. They're spectacular, aren't they? You've separated from me. You've revealed yourselves. Mezuzah, it's Mazuwzah. Translated here, I translated framework. Mm-hmm. It's from Zeus, which means the fullness and abundance of life. If it had not been a rabbinical replacement, this would have been the doorway to heaven, the passageway to eternal life. The door to life is found in the Torah. It's opened through the Moed Mikre. To lead Jews in a different directions, rabbis wrote about their alternative in the Talmud. Having chosen to make their bed apart from God, and the rabbis, therefore, have been exposed by Yashayah. It is, therefore, a shame that the religious charlatans retain their lovers in spite of this. The sexual abuse crisis pummeling Roman Catholicism, as I've shared, is not exclusive to the pedophile priests. While they have claimed Olympic gold in the all-around perversity, the bronze medal goes to the rabbis, who are only slightly less egregious than Muslims, who, of course, have claimed the silver medal for reasons explained in Prophet of Doom. And true to form, when they are exposed by those they have abused, the Hasidic condemn the victims while rallying around the rabbinical scum. There's a lot of reasons that Islam turned out the way it did. Mm-hmm. And the reason is that much of the Quran was plagiarized by Muhammad paying for Talmud readings from the rabbis. And even this is how to wipe your butt. Well, the rabbis wrote all about that. I mean, everything that appears the rabbis had something to say about it. Scum. recognizing that we turn to this particular passage to affirm the nature and the timing of Towrah harvest, and we found it. The subsequent material is providing valuable insights into the religious and political landscape that will exist immediately before and after the fulfillment of the invitation to be called out and meet of trumpets. And what we are seeing here is that Judaism is now on center stage, because it is what Yehudim will be saved from as we progress towards Yom Kippurim. In this next statement, the Dead Sea Scrolls confirm what the rabbis have, or that the rabbis have modeled their religion after Moloch, the Ammonite and Phoenician sun god, whose religious rituals Yahweh condemned repeatedly, calling Moloch the harlot and the whore of Babylon. I think the whore of Babylon may well be the Babylonian Talmud, however. Admonitions against Moloch. Yeah, the whore of Babylon. So admonitions against Moloch and his veneration can be found in Leviticus 25, where Yahweh says he will separate himself from those who chase after this whore. In Isaiah 30:33, we learn that hell was created for Satan in the guise of Moloch, and that fire and brimstone will be his lot. Moloch is called a detestable idol in Malachim, 1 Kings 11:7. He is the abomination of Ammon in 2 Kings 23:13. Moloch's religion is excoriated in Leviticus 8:21 and 22-5. Malachim, 2 Kings 23:10. Jeremiah 32:35, saying that honoring Moloch profanes the name of Yahweh.
Yeah, the Israelites, the northern tribes, they loved him.
They loved him, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The
sacrificed their children. They actually sacrificed their children to him. God.
So, I mean, God's got to be disgusted. He was disgusted. God reveals that anyone who performs a religious rite in Moloch's honor will lose their life. And they are told that Lord Baal, Satan's most common title, and Moloch are one and the same. They built shrines to Baal and caused their children to pass through the fires of Moloch, which is an abomination. So Moloch and the Lord, one and the same. So what is the God's name of and rabbinic Judaism? It sure as hell ain't Yahweh. It is the Lord.
The Lord.
Yeah, so if you're a rabbinic Jew and you're saying, well, we don't worship Moloch, well, God named him Baal. And you sure as hell do worship Baal. Second only to your own rabbis. Yeah, my Lord. These associations considered, let's proceed. You descended toward Moloch, the king of the god of the Ammonites and Phoenicians, whom the Israelites sacrificed their infant sons in the valley of Hinnom from Moloch to become a sovereign ruler, with oil and with numerous perfumes, along with your medicinal ointments, sending out delegations of your anguished envoys as witnesses into perpetuity, into the distant separation of the humbling and lowly status endured upon reaching Sheol. Well, we're not broadcasting anymore. We are still recording. Let's.
Oh, we are. Oh, yeah.
Let's tackle this. It's saying that you descended toward Moloch, who Yahweh has named the Lord.
Right.
You did so with your anointing oil and with numerous perfumes and medicinal ointments. You made a big deal out of the Lord, sending out delegations of your envoys, and they were witnesses into perpetuity, into the separation and the humbling of a lowly status of separation that will follow, endured upon reaching Sheol. So Sheol is diminishment, it is separation. It comes from sending out delegations whose witness speaks of honoring the Lord. So if you have a religion where your God is known as the Lord, which would be true of Islam, Christianity, and Judaism,
absolutely.
If that's your Lord, then you understand that your witness is degrading and that it will ultimately deliver you to the humility and lowly status of those experienced in Sheol. Sheol is hell. It is the place of separation from God. Go ahead.
I find it interesting that you in the same sentence you've identified Paul, lowly and little, and Sheol. Yeah.
Yes, endured upon
same nature, same
upon reaching
same
Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that it's hard for me to render this Shaul, because Shaul and Sheol are spelled exactly the same way.
Oh no, I know.
And normally I
it
would
identifies it as hell.
Make a big point when Yahweh speaks of it, is that God is condemning rabbis. Now, to be fair, what did Paul claim to be?
He claimed to be a rabbi.
Right.
The best.
In fact, not only did he claim to be a rabbi, he claimed that he was the best of rabbis and that he was the top student of Gamaliel.
Yeah.
So he didn't just claim to be a rabbi. He actually said, I was the best of the rabbis. Man, I was a super student as a rabbi.
Magna cum laude.
Yeah. And so it does fit in terms of a rabbi here and taking people on a downward journey to Sheol by worshiping the Lord and by Shemun anointing someone who does not deserve to be anointed.
Mm-hmm.
Sending out delegations of anguishing envoys. Think of the delegations of Roman Catholics and Christians that tormented God's people. So you're right. I probably should have included Paul in this. I guess I'm getting
well, it wasn't
so
necessary.
far.
It's just my ears perk up when I see lowly and little. You know, it's like the father of lies and so forth. That's what he's been called because I've read questioning Paul so much. And Sheol and Shaul being spelled the same way and identify them as both as a place of questioning or a man of should be questioned. So
in the Sermon on the Mount, Yahweh said the workmanship's clothing will be known as the person who besmirches the Torah, who degrades the Torah and diminishes it, who is of course Sheol, Paul. That individual would be known in heaven as lowly and little. And the Latin name, Roman name that Paul chose for himself, Paulos, means lowly and little. So that is the connection there. And of course, Sheol and Shaul Paul are the same name. Well, Sheol and Shaul, which was Paul's given name, are the same name. The name that he is condemned, and he was in fact a rabbi that separated many Jews initially, and then Goyim, so that they would all end up in hell. So there is a.
I just never saw these people walking so much in step, until you started doing this, till I started reading this. I mean, they're just locking step on so much. I mean, it's the same crap over and over.
Yeah,
I just never thought of it that way.
I guess my excuse for not identifying this.
It's not necessary.
It was the fact that by this time in Yashaya, God will go out of his way to condemn Gentiles en masse. But he is basically saying that my problem is religious rabbis and religious Jews. That's the problem. And so almost all of the prophecies pertaining to the fulfillment of Towrah and Kippurim leading up to Sukkah are excoriating rabbis and rabbinic Judaism. And so it's with all of the focus on the things like, for example, God would speak of the Torah of the mouth and of your Torah. Well, there's only one religion that has their own Torah, in Judaism. So since it's all attacks on Judaism, it's hard to say, well, this also includes Christianity because that was that dude's name, and he chose lowly and little as Paulos. His given name was Shaul, and He was a wannabe rabbi.
No, you did it right. You wanted to be focused on the rabbis and not get dissuaded and go somewhere else. So I didn't even mean to bring it up, other than it was so obvious to me.
Yeah. And I get tunnel vision in doing this.
No, I understand.
For the very reason that
and you should.
I think I've beat the nails in the coffin of Shaul through questioning Paul to the point where we've got 4 volumes, each of which is about 500 pages.
Yeah,
so there's
gotcha.
A little over 2,000 pages. I think there's 2,300, 400 pages of material condemning Shaul. That's probably up there, being close to enough. But this too has him. Now, this is the ultimate place of departure. Those harvested by Yahowah on Towrah are escorted to heaven, while those dispatched by the rabbis are sent away to Sheol. We can descend with the religious, or we can ascend in the relationship. Either way, up or down, there is very little time. And so, because the checkout time is approaching, you may want to consider your choices before booking reservations. Now, based upon all we have learned about Sheol, this place of separation from the light, of perpetual incarceration where nothing escapes, of being infinitely diminished except in time, it is very, very similar to a black hole. And to think that the rabbis are sending their own devotees there and charging them for, while denying its existence, which they do, is reprehensible. And one of the most interesting things about Rabbinic Judaism is they take some really extraordinary stances. They say that God is incorporeal. And yet God constantly uses terms like face, hands, feet, stance.
Mm-hmm.
He speaks of meeting with the likes of Moshe and eating with them, meeting with and dining with Abraham, meeting with Jacob, and the passage that I read from Malachi, he actually has a word that says, I'm just one, and yet I have a corporeal nature and a spiritual nature. Still just one of me, but I can present myself corporeally. And the rabbis will deny that he has a corporeal nature. Then, the rabbis will deny his name. And they'll say,
7,000 times.
No one knows how to pronounce it, and yet they have their own Torah, and Torah tells you how to pronounce it. Towrah. It's pretty clear how to
we didn't put the point system in. They did.
The rabbis also deny Sheol, hell. And yet, how many times does Yahweh talk about it? So you can deny it all you want. It doesn't make it go away. They also deny salvation. There is no salvation in Rabbinic Judaism. I don't know if you know that. There's none. They don't believe in salvation.
That's starting to sound like Islam.
I don't know what they do. In Islam there is.
They get a happy place, don't they? So.
Oh, they got a happy place. Oh yeah.
God.
Go to the happy place. Multiple virgins and lovely couches and the finest foods and every the Islamic heaven has everything but Allah. Allah spends all of his time in hell.
In hell, of course.
Of course. but nonetheless, Rabbinic Judaism has no plan of salvation because there is no salvation. You're doing all of this to leave the world a better place. They say you're striving to be righteous and to do what's best for your fellow man. And of course, they say that while none of them work, none of them make a contribution of any kind. They treat their women like, worse than we would treat a domesticated animal. They deprive their children of any growth or any opportunity to make a contribution. They don't do anything that enhances the world in any way, totally self-centered, and yet they believe that their claim of salvation is to be righteous so that they leave the world better than they found it. Talk about deluded. But that's the nature of rabbinic Judaism. You're doing it all for nothing. I don't know why you do it, but you're doing it all for nothing because there is no salvation, and of course they don't think there's any hell. Their God is unknown. They worship the rabbis. They even call their own Talmud a Torah, so they don't have to ignore the fact that Yahowah has one, and they can pretend to be Torah observant, where God said, "No, you're unobservant." Yeah, the truth is
Lo Shamar.
That rabbinic Judaism has been more lethal to Jews than Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Greece,
Germany,
Imperial Rome, and the Roman Catholic Church, even the Muslims and Nazis combined.
Yeah, I see that now.
The single most lethal force on Jews is rabbinic Judaism. If it were not for rabbinic Judaism, there never would have been any one of the three Roman assaults on Judea. If you want to know what happens if you are really Torah observant and you listen to Yahweh, go check out Hezekiah. When 85,000 Syrian troops descended upon Jerusalem, and God wiped them out. Well, the inhabitants of Jerusalem didn't lift a finger other than to celebrate Pesach. If it wasn't for rabbinic Judaism, there would have been no Roman assaults, there would have been no diaspora. And without the Roman assaults and the diaspora, there would have been no place for Christianity to get a foothold. If it hadn't been for rabbis taking Yahweh's name out of his word, no one would believe that Jesus was God. If the rabbis had actually celebrated Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim correctly, then there'd been no way to foist the notion of a resurrected Passover lamb. There would have been no chance for Christianity to take hold and to torment Jews for 2,000 years. There would have been no Islam, because without rabbinic Judaism and the Babylonian Talmud, there is no Quran. Jews have manufactured their own enemy, and they have withdrawn from Yah's providence and protection by having angered him and attacked him and diminished his credibility and besmirched his name and invalidated his covenant and besmirched his Torah. If it had not been for rabbinic Judaism, there would have been none of this. The Holocaust would not have happened. So, that does not exonerate the Nazis, does not exonerate the Muslims, does not exonerate the Roman Catholic Church, does not exonerate Imperial Rome, does not exonerate the Babylonians or the Assyrians or the Greeks or the Mitzrayim, the Egyptians. It is to tell you that for the past 2,200 years, the most deadly influence, the most debilitating influence over Israelites and Yehudim have been rabbis. And that nothing of the hell that they have endured would have happened if rabbis had not hijacked the Torah, Yahweh's testimony, and his covenant. So the very people who claim that they define who is Jewish are the very people who have disassociated Yehudim from their name. And that is the message that is contained in these latter chapters of Yashayah. It is the message of Zechariah. It is the message of Malachi. Either Zechariah or Malachi is the last of God's prophets. And rather than them predicting the rise of rabbinic Judaism, they condemn it.
Wow.
So we have an enemy, and for the foreseeable future, I stand corrected and said yes. I should have referenced Paul here, but we've done our part to expose and condemn Christianity. There's really nothing more that needs to be said. I've done my part to expose and condemn Islam. Nothing more needs to be said.
No, absolutely.
The most deadly religion, the one that for the next 12 years, Yahweh is the most focused on exposing and condemning and liberating his people from, is Judaism. And I have to be a little bit careful from that. God is not trying to save religious Jews. He hates them. Mm-hmm. He is trying to save Jews from the religion.
Mm-hmm.
So the Jews who are not captivated by the religion, the Jews who are still open to the truth, the Jews who will consider the Torah, the Jews who are still searching for Yahweh, who are still open to Yahweh, who are interested in embracing their name again. He wants to save them from the nasty effects of the rabbis upon Jewish society and Jewish culture. And so I don't know how many Yehudim will find their way home. I don't know in the end. And our mission is to make the truth available, to do what has to be done. We have to expose and condemn Islam because it seeks to eradicate Jews.
Annihilate, absolutely.
And condemn Christianity because no religion has ever been as hostile to God's people as
Christian world hates them too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they need to understand that the New Testament isn't from God. And they need to understand how both of those religions are wrong so that they have an appreciation of why it's appropriate to expose and condemn them, to be opposed to them, which Israel doesn't understand at this point. They do not know how to speak against Islam. They do not know how to speak against Christianity.
No,
and that's because they don't
Judeo-Christian ideas.
Right, and they don't know how to speak against rabbinic Judaism.
Yeah.
So it's essential, because the covenant requires us first and foremost to walk away from our societies, our religion, our politics, that we give God's people the tools to do that. And since there is no one in Israel, there is no Jew with the courage, the compassion to do what we're doing to excoriate Judaism and to use Yahweh's words against rabbinic Judaism, that mission has fallen squarely in our lap, and we're not going to back away from it. So you're going to hear a lot about why the rabbis are wrong, because God is fundamentally opposed to them, and he can't reconcile his relationship with Yehudim or Israel until they have enough of them separated themselves from this horrible, debilitating religion. And so that's why he focuses on it. And what God focuses on, guess what? We focus on. Yeah, we do too.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, so it's and when you do that, you're rewarded. And so we're going to continue to do what we have done, and as I say, while we're on this subject of the Day of Reconciliations, God wants his people to know what the relationship is being reconciled from, why it is broken. And the answer is Judaism. We are not being anti-Semitic when we denounce Judaism, because it's Judaism that is anti-Semitic.
That's right. It's absolutely
right.
So
exposing something that is anti-Semitic is being pro-Shem, not anti-Shem.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, it's been a pleasure to be with you. I look forward to being with you next week. Asher says hello to everybody. She was right here at my feet listening to the whole show. She gave it a 2 paws up.
So, hey, 2 paws up, yeah.
Yeah, two paws up. So we look forward to being with you next week. Shabbat shalom to everyone. Again, thank you one and all for what you have done. We've over this last year, we have come so far in improving the quality of these books, getting them republished and represented, and with the website and everything and the content and the translations and the whole presentation. We've come further in the last year, I think, than we did in the 19 years preceding it. So I'm excited. I'm thrilled by what the next year is going to offer, and we look forward to having more and more Yehudim and Goyim alike come to know Yahweh and choose to be part of His covenant. Happy Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom. We'll be with you this time next week.
Okay. Thank you, Yada.
Sure.
Night.
Night.